Good morning. Okay. Good Erev Rosh Hashanah. What a great way to start the day. Okay, we are up to, I have a bookmark, 4a, by stopping point, no? 4a. One second. Yeah, okay, 1 second. We're up to, I think somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Okay, so we're up to about, actually smack in the middle. Right in the middle of the page, and right in the middle of the line, in the middle of the page. The Eshkechan Shinui Kodesh. So Shinui Kodesh means when you have in mind another sacrifice. So a change in Kodesh, meaning a change in the sanctity of the offering. So we learned already that the 4 services you have to have the right intentions. That's the ideal. You have to have for the sake of the chatos when you shecht it, for the sake of the sin offering when you throw the blood, and when you walk the blood, when you accept the blood into the vessel. They all require having that in mind. Shinui bailim minalon. However, when the Kohen does all these things, how do we know that he has to have me in mind? Me, the owner of the sin offering, the owner of the ola offering. How do you know for all 4 of the avodas, of the services, he has to have me in mind each step of the way? Amar Papa, Breder of Ami, Amar Krav, says the pasuk, Ubisar Zevach Todas Shlama. So by a Toda, it says the meat of the Zevach Toda Shlama. So it says the word Zevach, which often means slaughtering. So the meat should be slaughtered Todas Shlamav. Shetehei Zvicha L'Shem Toda. That the offering should be shechted, should be slaughtered for the sake of the Toda. Now hold on. We just learned already that we know already that slaughtering has to be for the sake of the offering. So the Torah seems to be repetitive. So that we have a principle. When you already know something from somewhere, and the Torah seems to say it again, we say, well, if it's not for the purpose of this, it'll be for the purpose of that. So, if it's not for the purpose of slaughtering for the sake of that animal, because that we learned already a different source for that, we learned it from over there. So rather, it's coming to tell you that it has to be slaughtered for the owner. Good morning, Jared. So says the Gemara, hold on, not so fast. You think this verse is just available to use for the Kohen having in mind the person that he's slaughtering for? We need it for something else. You need it for the following brisa. This verse that says when you slaughter the thanks offering. So Abba Chanan Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, it comes to teach us Toda sheshakta l'shem shlamim sheira. So you have a Toda offering, a thanks offering, and a shlamim offering, and a peace offering. Those are different. Here it says Todas Shlamav. What does it mean, Todas Shlamav? So it's not available to teach us that it has to be slaughtered for the sake of the owner, because it's already being used to teach us that if you would slaughter a Toda, a thanks offering, you would shecht it, right? Before we say our Birkas HaGomels after we fly somewhere, we fly over the ocean and get released from prison, so you would bring a thanks offering instead. Instead of just getting an aliyah and saying one bracha, you'd bring a thanks offering. Then you have to eat it with all your friends and thank Hashem in public. So let's say you had that offering and you would slaughter it, but for the sake of a shlamim, for a peace offering. So that he says that's going to be valid. Shlamim shakla shem toda psula. If you go the other way, it's going to be invalid. If you take a peace offering and check it as a Toda offering, it's going to be invalid. So what's the difference? Ma hefresh bein zeh lezeh. So says the Gemara, very simple. Toda kriya shlamim. We see here that a Toda is called a shlamim, but ein shlamim kriya Toda. So a Toda is referred to as a shlamim, but not the other way around. We don't find a shlamim being referred to as a Toda. Okay, so that verse is not available to teach us what we need to learn. So anan mi Zevach kamrinan. So says the Gemara, we're not learning from the fact that it says Toda Shlamav, because that you need for something else. Rather, we're learning from the word Zevach. That one. You're right. The word Toda Shlamav teaches you that if you slaughter a Toda for the sake of a Shlamim, it's going to be good. But the word Zevach there, you have to slaughter it for, teaches us that it has to be slaughtered for a certain purpose. So it's two different expositions. One is from the fact that Torah called it a todas shlamav, a thanks peace offering. That's referring to that if you slaughter a thanks offering as a peace offering, it's valid. But then there's the word zevach. You should slaughter it for the sake of something. And if you don't need it to teach you for the sake of the offering, it must be available to teach you for the sake of the owner. So, okay. Says the Gemara, but hold on. Va'akasi mi ba'ilei. Va'akasi mi ba'ilei. Chatos v'asham minayin. So, we still need this verse to teach us that chatos v'asham minayin. How do you know that by a sin offering or the guilt offering that what you have to slaughter it for its sake?
When we
How do So chatas v'asham minayin. How do you know that a chatas and an asham? How do you know that these sin offerings you only have one night and one day to eat them? Talmud Lomer is zevach, because it says zevach. Since it says the word zevach, so we know you only have. Sorry, not the. Yeah, the word zevach comes to teach you that just like the chatas and the asham, you only have one day and one night. So to the thanks offering, you only have one day and one night. So the word zevach is not available to teach us that you have to slaughter for the sake of the owner. So says the Gemara, Im Kain, if that's true, then the way the verse should be written, the words should be positioned a little bit differently. Nichtov kra, the pasuk should say, Basar toda shlamov, zevach, the meat of the toda shlamov, which was slaughtered. That's how it should say it. Why does it put zevach first in the sentence? Mai zevach. So it says, Shmamina tarti. That's how you know. So at the end of the day, the word zevach teaches you have one day and one night to eat it. The placement of zevach in the beginning of the verse tells you have to do it for the sake of the owner. And the formulation of the sacrifice, toda shlamav, teaches you that a thanks offering sacrifice as a shlamim is going to be kosher. So you have three things learned out of this verse. One of them is what we need. The fact that the word zevach was mentioned first in the verse teaches you there's a certain that there's a certain way how you slaughter it. You have to have in mind the owner. So
it's unusual that you learn more than one thing from that.
Right. So that's what the Gemara is asking, and the Gemara answers, even though you don't learn two things from one thing, but the positioning sometimes is a hint that we can learn something else from here. Yeah. Because if it only wanted one thing, it would keep the positioning in its normal format. The fact that it changed the positioning of the word lends its way to another interpretation. But yeah, you are usually right. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So that is slaughtering. So now we have three more services to go. How do you know that the other three have to be done for the sake of the owner? So when he slaughters the animal, has to be for Gleizer. When he receives the blood, has to be for Gleizer. When he sprinkles the blood on it has to be for Gleizer. And when you bring up on the altar, also has to be for Gleizer. How do you know that's true? Eshkechan zvicha, we find zvicha, shar avodos minalan. The rest of the services, how do you know that has to be done for the sake of the owner? So says the Gemara, it's basically the same pattern as yesterday. Learn it all out from slaughtering. And we're going to say, no, slaughtering has a certain stringency to it when it comes to Pesach. By Pesach, we said if you slaughter the animal, but you have in mind people that can't eat it, sick people, old people, they're not going to be able to participate, that's going to invalidate the slaughtering. A big stringency that we don't find other places. So once you have a certain stringency, it can't be a paradigm to other things that don't have that same stringency. If you throw the blood, having in mind someone who can't eat the Pesach offering, it's not going to invalidate it. Only if you slaughter it. So since you have that stringency, it can't be a paradigm for the other three services. So Nemra Zvicha B'Shinui Kodesh, we have slaughtering by changing of sanctity, meaning by having the wrong sacrifice in mind. V'Nemra Zvicha, and the word Zvicha is also mentioned by Shinui Bailim, by having the wrong owner in mind. So Ma Zvicha Hamur B'Shinui Kodesh, just like Zvicha, slaughtering when it came to having in mind the wrong sacrifice, we did not differentiate, at the end of the day, we did not differentiate between slaughtering and the other three services, the Sharavodos. So too, slaughtering Hamura B'Shinei Balam, when it comes to having the right owner in mind, we also shouldn't differentiate between slaughtering and the other three services. Lo techalik ben zvicha l'sharavodos. So basically, let's learn from when you slaughter an animal, you have to have in mind a sin offering, the ola offering, the thanks offering. You have to always have that in mind. And there, you have to have in mind each one of the four services. At the end of the day, we have a verse for each one, but that's what it says. So now, use that as a paradigm for over here, that just like the slaughtering has to be done for the sake of the owner, so too the next three services have to be done for the sake of the owner as well. Okay. So on that, the Gemara says we can refute this. Let's refute it. Mala shinui kodesh shekain psula begufo v'yeshna ba'arba avodos v'yeshna la'achar misa v'yeshna b'tzibur kebiyachid. So seems to be four differences, which we're going to say is really only two, but four differences between slaughtering for the sake of that sacrifice to slaughtering for the sake of the owner. What are these differences? So the first one is shekain psula begufo. So we're going to explain later what it is, but it sounds like there's an invalidation in the offering itself. The Gemara is going to explain. V'yeshno ba'arba avodos, that if you slaughter or receive the blood or walk the blood, so then it's going to invalidate. It's going to invalidate the service. However, this idea of having the owner in mind is only it's not going to apply to all four of the services. Why not? So Rashi speaks out that this idea of having the wrong owner in mind is really specific to the throwing of the blood. Why? Because the way you invalidate it is you slaughter the animal, but you have in mind that you're going to throw the blood and atone for somebody else. Meaning the throwing of the blood is the ultimate atonement. The Zrika's down. That's the main service, is the throwing of the blood. So if you slaughter the animal on condition to when you throw the blood, you're going to atone for somebody else. So then that's how you invalidate. That's how you invalidate it. But if you're going to slaughter the animal to have in mind someone else, sounds like when you walk the blood over, that's not going to invalidate it. So really, this whole thing is specific to who do you have in mind when you slaughter the animal? Who do you have in mind when you're going to throw the blood onto the altar? I believe they say differently. Right. When it comes to atonement, they were talking about atonement over here, as opposed to us, which only applies to the throwing of the blood. For sure. Having in mind the sacrifice applies to all four. How about having in mind the owner? That's really only going to apply to Zrika, to get atonement. Yeah, we're gonna see it later on Daf Yod, that when you're giving someone an atonement, the real atonement is going to come when you throw the blood. That's the ultimate atonement. So if you want to invalidate it, the invalidation would be that you slaughter, but instead of having Reuben in mind, when you say like this, I'm slaughtering the animal, I'm having in mind Shimon, not Reuben, that when I throw the blood, which is going to give atonement, it's only going to give atonement to the Shimon, not Reuben, because the throwing of the blood is the ultimate atonement. So that's really how you invalidate it, by having someone else in mind. So the Gemara is saying that only applies to really when you shecht, you have in mind the wrong person for the throwing of the blood. Our case of having in mind the sacrifice applies to all four. Having in mind the right owner really only applies to the throwing of the blood. That's really where it's crucial. So that's another difference. The yeshno la'achar misa, if one separates a korban and then a person, God forbid, dies, so then the heir, the one who inherits it, has to bring up the sacrifice. But that's only by when you have in mind that you're bringing the offering for a chatas. So now the person dies, the child has to bring the chatas, but it's not really going to apply by a person. If you have in mind that Reuben should get atoned, and then Reuben dies, So what do you want? Shimon to get atoned now? That's not going to work. It's only, but if you have in mind, I'm bringing this as a chatas offering, and you want a refund. And then if you say I'm bringing in mind, this offering as a sin offering, and then the person dies, well, that offering is still a sin offering, so it's going to be brought. But if you have in mind you want to bring it for this person, and that person's not alive anymore, so then we're saying now that the owners are dead. So then that's going to be different. The yeshno b'tzibur, and it also applies to a congregation that the congregation can bring a sin offering or an ola offering, and when you're slaughtering it, you can have in mind, the wrong korban, the wrong sacrifice. So if the congregation is liable to bring a sacrifice, you can definitely mess that up by having in mind the wrong sacrifice. But when it comes to the wrong owner, what are you going to do? So at least now it assumes that when the congregation brings an offering, you can't have the wrong owner because everyone's the owner. It's the congregation. So the congregation represents every individual. And therefore, if you have in mind anybody, they're still part of the congregation. Okay. Therefore, you cannot learn out from the changing of sanctity, having in mind the wrong sacrifice, to having in mind the wrong owner. Turning the page. Now the Gemara sort of steps back a little bit. The afagav de tarti lav dafka. We said there's 4 differences. We really meant there's only 2 differences, not 4. But tarti miha dafka. But 2 of them, nevertheless, are differences, which is enough that you cannot learn one from the other, as we'll see. Okay. So now the Gemara is going to analyze this a little bit. So what's the difference? Shinui bailim, that when you have in mind the wrong owner, de lo have psula begufa, it's not considered an invalidation in the, so to speak, the body of the sacrifice itself. It's a machshava ba'alma. It's having the wrong thoughts. So you can have different ways to invalidate something. You could have the wrong thoughts, or somehow you could actually, if you put a blemish in a sacrifice, that's going to invalidate it. So apparently having in mind the wrong sacrifice is more similar to a blemish in the sacrifice. Having in mind the wrong owner is just, it's the wrong thought you had, but we don't consider it a blemish in the sacrifice. So says the Gemara, okay, so Shini Kodesh Nami Machshava Almahu. Well, maybe having in mind the wrong sacrifice is all just a thought. It's having the wrong thought, and it's not as severe as having a blemish in the sacrifice itself. So says the Gemara, Ela Kavan de Akshava Pasla, since a wrong thought invalidates it, so Hakanami, Kavan de Akshava Pasla. So just like the wrong thought invalidates, so then it should invalidate here also. That's the question. That's a. It doesn't find that to be a difference, right? So to here it invalidates it. Meaning we don't see a big difference between those 2. We gave 4 differences. This one is not really a difference, because what's different? At the end of the day, your wrong thought invalidates it. So that's that. Okay, so that one doesn't sound to be such a difference. What about the other one about after death? There is such a thing that you could have the wrong owner in mind. According to him, he holds According to him, he says that even if you have the wrong owner in mind, if that original owner dies, so now you still have to bring the sacrifice. So he argues, even if you have the original owner in mind, if you have the wrong owner in mind and the owner dies, you still need to bring that sacrifice. It's not you don't say, oh, well, the owner's not here anymore, he's dead, therefore I don't have to bring it. No, you still have to bring it. So says the Gemara, okay, fine. So those 2 out of 4 we proved are not necessarily ironclad objective differences. The first one, we could say they're both bad thoughts. We don't see such a difference. Why is one more of a blemish than the other, having the wrong thought? Fine. And the other difference of after death is also not such a difference according to Rav Pinchas. So we have 2 out of the 4 differences at the end of the day, but still we have 2 out of 4 different. That's still a difference. Tarti miha ikal mifrach. We still have 2, and therefore, when you want to know, do I have to have in mind all the 4 services in terms of who the owner is? You have to have him in mind for all 4 services. We cannot learn from the fact that I have to have in mind which sacrifice it is for all four services, because we have two differences, which therefore you cannot use that as a paradigm for us. So Ella, we have to go somewhere else to find it. Now,
Figure out. Somebody died.
someone what?
Somebody's dead. Like, who's the victim for?
It depends, but it would be
You
his inheritor has to bring for him.
Okay, so the cost for him, even though he's.
I think so. It depends for what. Maybe a chatas would be the sin offering would be for him. A thanks offering, an ola offering.
Okay.
Yeah, presumably. It's his obligation to bring it. So
But he's not.
you want to know how? I hear what you're asking. I think Jared's asking a sin offering which atones.
Yeah.
Now the guy's dead, so you're throwing the blood on. So, but right, there's two ways to look at it. Either somehow it does atone, which would be interesting to find out how that works, or even though it doesn't atone, by the end of the day, it has sanctity. So what are you gonna do with it? Maybe you have an okay, and we have to see. Continue our another 115 pages.
The Gemara will tell.
Yeah, hopefully. So, so as long as we say that, right, then there's a hope. So, okay.
Almost always does.
Yeah, but good question. So this is probably like where the Rambam Maimonides comes in, right? He takes the entire tractate and puts into a few chapters, tells you all the main laws, right? Amazing. So I'm assuming he talks about it there, but yeah. Okay, El Amar of Ashi. Let's find another verse that will tell us that you have to have in mind the owner for all steps of the process. So the pasuk says, at least when we see Vayikra next time around, it'll be a little more familiar, right? A little more familiar. So v'nir tzalo lechaper alav v'lo al chavero. So you bring an offering, and it's going to appease, it's going to atone. V'nir lechaper alav. It's going to atone for you. It's upon him. So what does that mean? On you v'lo al chavero, meaning when you want to atone for somebody, has to be for him, not for his friend. So you have to have him in mind, not his friend in mind. So that would be a good source. Now, what's the atonement here? Lechaper. It's a way of saying the throwing of the blood. It says lechaper is atoning, Yom Kippur is atonement. So here the verse says you should atone for him is not his friend. So what does atonement mean? It means the throwing of the blood, which shows you that the throwing of the blood has to be for him and not for his friend. So now, says the Gemara, really? Is that available for that exposition? I need it for the following. You're going to bring it, it's going to atone for him. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Es she'alav chayev b'achri yuso, v'es she'eno alav eno chayev b'achri yuso. Only he who is responsible to bring it atones for, but he who is not responsible to bring it cannot atone for him. So, let's say an example. We said that a neder versus a nedava. A neder is a vow offering. You say, it's upon me, hare alai. It's upon me to bring this offering. So, what happens in that case if the animal, let's say, dies or gets stolen? So, at the end of the day, it's on me to bring a sacrifice, no matter what. So it's on me to bring a sacrifice, and not on somebody else. So the verse "upon me" is coming to teach you that when you took upon yourself the obligation, hare alai, it's upon me to bring an animal. You have to follow through with it. If it dies, if it gets stolen, whatever it is, at the end of the day, you are responsible and nobody else to bring that offering. As opposed to when you say this offering should be brought. If you say this offering should be brought and then it gets stolen, then you're not obligated to bring an offering because you only wanted this offering to be brought. Now the offering's gone. So it's just coming to teach you basically the difference between a neder and a nedava. A neder is a vow, it's upon me to bring. And no matter what, if you pledge $100 to a shul, we don't care if it's the $100 in your wallet right now or the $100 that's in the ATM waiting to be taken out. We don't care. It's upon you to fulfill that vow. On nedavas, though, you say, I really want to give, this watch to the synagogue. Okay, so that watch got stolen tomorrow. So I never promised another watch. I wanted that watch to be given. So the chazan makes sure he finishes on time.
This $100.
Right, this $100 bill. Yeah, if you would say exactly. So that's all the verse is telling you. That when you take upon yourself the obligation, you have to bring it no matter what. But the word alav is not available to teach you that the throwing of the blood that you have to have the owner in mind and not somebody else. It's already used for this. The Amar of Yitzchak bar Avdimi, The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Mai Taima, Kevan the Amar Alai, Kiman the Ton like Akatfe Dami. When the person says upon me, it's like he now took upon the burden on his shoulders. So therefore he has to do it. That burden has to be fulfilled. So Rav Ashi says, Mi v'nirtza lo lechaper kamar. It sounds like we're learning out from v'nirtza lo. He will be appeased. Lechaper. He will be atoned for. So not the word alav, but the word lo. Mi v'nirtza lo lechaper. It has to be for him in atonement. For him in atonement and not for somebody else, meaning you have to have him in mind when you're atoning for him, but not somebody else in mind. You better be nice to the Kohanim. No, you better give them good.
I want to.
Yeah, they have one thought off, and who knows what's going to happen to your atonement?
Yeah, I want a refund machine.
You want a refund machine,
How do I know I just got a lemon here?
or you want to invest in Cohen school to make sure they walk out.
Similar, right? Like, like they don't think about something else.
I'm assuming a person trusts their doctor when they go in for a procedure, right? They don't. I mean, I don't think every guy that wakes up after a surgery goes, "I want a refund."
You don't really know what he's thinking.
That's right. That's right. So,
No problem, you don't know.
Maybe he's thinking about his.
what do you say?
Say you got a good lawyer behind you.
You got a good lawyer behind you, right?
You might be thinking about his wife.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely hope not. We hope a person imbued with more sanctity lives up to that mission. Yeah. It's at the end of the day. At the end of the day, Hashem knows everyone's thoughts. So if he wants to walk into Yom Kippur knowing that he just messed up 100 people's sacrifices, that's up to him. He's going to have the worst end of the deal than us, right? So you don't want to have that on your shoulders. Okay, so that is Eshkachan, Zvicha, Viz, Rika. We have slaughtering for the sake of the owner. We have throwing the blood for the sake of the owner. What about the Kabbalah, the accepting of the blood for the sake of the owner? Minalan. So same pattern as before. Learn out from slaughtering and from throwing of the blood. It has to be done for that owner in mind. Zvicha, the slaughtering, and the throwing have a stringency. If you do it outside of their prescribed area, then you are going to be liable. If you accept the blood, you're not going to be as liable. Are you liable at all? I don't know. I don't think you get death in the hands of heaven for that. It's much less stringent to accept the blood outside your prescribed area than it is to slaughter and throw the blood outside the prescribed area. Therefore, you can't learn out from Zvicha and from Zrika. We need to find somewhere else. Ela Maravashi Asya Ma'ayel Nazir. So Ayel Nazir is the ram that a Nazir brings at the completion of his Nazir service. One of the, I think, 2 or 3 offerings that's brought at the end of his service. Dichsiv, how does it phrase it? V'esha'ayel yaseh zevach shlomim. This ram should be brought zevach shlomim. That word zevach is always the kicker. Zevach shlomim. What does it mean? Shetehei asiyaso l'shem shlomim. You have to make this offering. You have to have in mind a shlomim. Now, 1 second. We already know that you have to have in mind for the sacrifice, for which sacrifice you're bringing. So that's this one of the ways to derive things is, if we see something which we know already, so it's not used. If this is not teaching us, the word zeva can't be teaching us that you have to have in mind the right sacrifice, because that we know already. We learn it from over there. So rather, you should learn from here that you have to have in mind the right owners, and that's what it's teaching you. So so says the Gemara, was that really true? It says that's ayil ya'aseh zevach shlomim. You should take the ram. It should be done. It should be made for a zevach shlomim. So now we know that we have a principle called a klal and a prat, and a klal prat to klal. Sometimes the Torah says a general statement, followed by a specific statement, followed by a general statement. So in this case, we're suggesting now, maybe yasa, it should be done. Yasa klal, done for what? Anything, general statement. Then it says zevach. Zevach is a prat. Not any one of the services it should be done for a certain reason, for the right intention. Just slaughtering. So it should be done for the right intention, but only slaughtering. So yasa klal, zevach prat, klalu prat, ein bechlal el masha beprat. All that's included in the general statement is that which the Torah specified, which would therefore mean zvicha in and midyach reini lo. Sacrificing has to be done for, let's say, the sake of the owner, but none of the other services, but nothing else. It's a klal uprat. So says the Gemara, okay, that would be true if the Torah phrased it in a certain way, but since it phrased it in a different way, it's not going to be true. So what are those two ways? Iksiv ya'aseh shlomim zevach. If it said ya'aseh, and then it said shlomim zevach, first that you should have in mind, you should do it. And then it says, do it for what? Shlomim zevach. So then you should sacrifice the shlomim for the sake of the shlomim. Then it will be kiddush amris, like you said. But hash the dichsiv, now that it says yaseh, it says yaseh zevach shlomim, not shlomim zevach, havale klal she'eno mole. So it's interesting. I'm not sure if I've ever saw this before. A klal or prat. So mole means full. So meaning basically there is a flaw in the klal, that the klal is not complete. It said you should make, but it didn't finish off make what? It just said a general statement, but didn't specify the end of that statement. You should make something, slaughtering something. What's yaseh? So yaseh zevach shlamim. It's not a complete klal. The kol klal she'eno mole ein danen oso beklal uprat. Any klal which is not complete, does not fall into this rule. Now, why exactly is it not complete? So it says so the Gemara understands that it says if it would have said yaseh shlomim zevach, that would have been a more complete statement. The fact that it says yaseh zevach shlomim, that makes it incomplete. So what does that mean? Let's see for a second. So Rashi says that if it would have said yaseh shlomim zevach, you should make the shlomim, right? And you would stop there. You should make the shlomim. So now you would think that it means for all of the services regarding the shlomim, you should have the right intentions in mind. Then it would have been zevach. Oh, only slaughtering, not the other three. So yaseh shlomim for all of the four services, and then it would have said zevach. No, only the slaughtering. That would have been a klal uprat. The shlomim should be made for the sake of a shlomim. Sounds like any four services. General. Then zevach would be specific, but it doesn't say that. Rather, it says ya'aseh. You should make what? Which offering for what? And then it says slaughtering a shlomim. So that it's considered to be an incomplete klal.
But if you said shlomim first, it wouldn't be a klal at all. Wouldn't it be a prat?
Why? How'd you know which part of the shlomim? Which four services? Just the shlomim.
Just a shlomim.
And then it would have said zevach. You'd be like, ooh, not anything of the shlomim, just the slaughtering of the shlomim. Right. So okay. So that's what we call an incomplete klal, and the kol klal she'eno mole ein danen oso beklal uprat. Then we cannot learn out a klal uprat. So Ravina Amar, no, laolam danen. Really, Ravina says you could derive this as a klal uprat. However, he's going to go the other way. Right now, we're saying it's not even a complete klal to teach you klal uprat. Ravina's going to say not only is it good, it's going to be a klal uprat to klal. Why? The klal is yaseh, make. The klal at the end is going to be la Hashem. So now, in the middle is going to be zevach. So la'olam danin ula Hashem chazer v'klal. At the end, it's a klal uprat to klal. It says the aisle should be yaseh. Yaseh should be yaseh slaughtered like a shlamim la Hashem for the sake of Hashem. So let's see. Yeah. So it should la'olam danin ula Hashem chazer klal. And therefore, klal uprat to klal, that whatever's included in the prat, or whatever's similar to the prat, you have to do. So, says the Gemara, but hold on, another rule in this technicality. The two klals are not similar to each other. One is like yaseh, which sounds like it's talking about the actual doing of the service. The four services have to be done for something. La Hashem is now another klal. You should do it for the sake of Hashem. Let's see. That's what we're saying. Let's see. Klalakama marba asios. The first klal yas that you should do includes all the doings, meaning all four services. The sulo. Klala basra. The last klal is kol la Hashem. Kol Hashem, meaning not only the 4 necessary services, but there are other services that are also included in the temple, such as Shvichas Shirayim, the pouring of the remainder of the blood onto the altar, V'haktaras Emurin, and the sacrificing the different limbs onto the temple. Those are also part of the service, but they're not the 4 essential services. So the first klal is Yasa, the 4 essential services. The last klal is La Hashem, includes all services, anything for Hashem. So therefore, I don't like this idea that it's a klal or pratu klal, because the 2 klals are not similar. So, okay. So, Hatana de Rabbi Shmuel beklali uprati darish kihai gavna. So apparently, the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, when he has a klal uprat like this, he actually does interpret it. Kihai gavna klal upratu klal ietadan ela ke'ena prat. He'll interpret this kind of klal upratu klal. He will learn it like this. What'd you say? Kihai, like this situation. Yeah. Klal upratu klal ietadan ela ke'en haprat. Then when you have a general with a specific, and then a general. So the specific is your paradigm of what you should do. So you're always going to learn it like the specific example. Mahaprat mefurish avoda. Just like the prat here is zevach, slaughtering. It's explicit. It's an explicit service. Uba inan lishman. And you have to do it with the right intention, let's say for the sake of the owner. So therefore, we see from there, afkol avoda. Any one of the services, uba inan lishman. We need to have the specific, you have to have the right intentions. So that would be good. Any one of the services has to be done with the right intentions, have the owner in mind. Imaha pratim mefurish avoda. But maybe you'll say, just like the specific example of slaughtering is explicit and is one of the services, v'chayavin aleh b'chutz, and you're liable if you would slaughter outside the right area, af kol avoda, maybe every avoda, every one of the services, you'll be liable. Then you'll be liable for slaughtering out, for not slaughtering. You'll be liable for any of the 4 services outside the prescribed area. So says the Gemara, no. Shchita v'zrika in kabbalah v'halacha lo. But that's not really true, because it's only slaughtering and throwing of the blood, if it's done outside its prescribed area, is going to be a problem. The other 2 services is not going to be a problem. Inami, another thing is maha pramafurish davar haton tzafon v'yeshna b'chatos apinimios. The shechting and the throwing of the blood is sometimes done in the north, which the other ones are not done, and it's going to be the yeshna b'chatos apinimios. You have the sacrifices that are brought on the inner altar, so you're going to throw the blood on the inner altar, not the outer altar, as opposed to the other services are not done on the inner altar, rather on the outer altar. So therefore, only things that require the north, which is only going to be the first 2, and you have that they are done on the inner altar. So what's that? Shchita v'kabbalah in and zrika lo. That's only going to be slaughtering and kabbalah and accepting of the dam. But zrika lo, but not the throwing of the dam. So this klal uprat can go either way. On the one hand, it can include that any service is done like the zvicha for the right purposes. On the other hand, you can get very nitty gritty and say that no. If you zoom into the specific slaughtering, it's going to be different than the other services. So basically, you have 2 ways to understand the klal uprat. Klal. Ika l'meimar hachi, v'ika l'meimar hachi. You could say it like this and you could say it like that. So shkul and hain v'yavo shneihen. So they're both equal and they're both going to come and teach you the rules. So it's true. All 4 services can be learned out of this klal pratu klal. You have to have the right intention. At the same time, you're also going to find distinctions between 2 of the services with the other services. Right. Yeah. Lishna achrina, another version is v'chada teiku b'milsa. Each one's going to stand in its place, meaning each teaching will stand strong in its place, and therefore, to say the same thing in different words, is that klal pratu klal is going to be true, we're gonna use the zrika, throwing the zvicha, the slaughtering, as the paradigm for the other services, and therefore you have to have in mind the owner for the other services too. At the same time, it's going to be different that the zvicha, the slaughtering, is going to be in the north and going to have on the inner altar, and the other ones won't. Yeah. 7. Okay. Ibais ema zrika. Maybe you'll say another answer is zrika midra of ashi nafka. So, according to Rav Ashi, we had earlier, it says v'nirtzlo lechaper, and that we're going to learn from that derivation of v'nirtzlo lechaper. And now the Gemara says, okay, but that was true. We learned out these we learned out the different services, but we learned it out from Eshchen Ayil Nazir, only from the sacrifice that's brought when a Nazir completes his service. Shar Shalom Minalan. Where do you know the rest of the peace offerings from? Maybe it's only by Ayil Nazir that you have to have in mind the owner, but the rest of the Shalom, how do you know? I think we'll have to continue on the show. Yeah.
Yeah.